What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of The Spiritual Word. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And I also like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research to come to your own conclusions, to have your own answers, and I believe in your ability to be your own person. And in today's episode, I was going to be talking about some things that I think is common that's not really common. And there's a lot of things that I think is common that's not really common. And I'm not talking about weird things like, oh, I like to chew ice, or I like to go outside when it's raining and, open my mouth or stuff like that, or open my mouth in the shower or stuff like that. It's not physical things. It's more like mental things and how I live that I think is really common. That's really not common, and that I need to acknowledge the fact that it's not common. So one of the things that I realized that is not really common is the fact that I have an ability to bounce back. And I say that it's not common, but it doesn't mean that it's not ever there. I always make this reference because I feel like this is a huge thing for me. I watched The Jersey Shore, and that's one of my favorite shows. And I just love the people, and I love the fact that they're real people, and they're just living the way that they want to live, and they've done things that's been on camera that may not have been the greatest thing, and they've had a lot of drama, but that's real, that's fucking real. And I come from a very unhealthy background, so to me that's very common. I see that all the time, so to me it's not really special. But anyways, I talk about Mike, the situation, a lot. Mike Sorrentino. And he used to be hardcore addicted to really heavy drugs. Heavy drugs that could kill you. And, he basically had to go to rehab a couple of times before it really kicked in. But I feel like that's anybody. If I'm telling you not to do something, it's going to take a couple times of me telling you not to do something in order for you to get yourself to not do that thing anymore. And I talk about him a lot just because he is really resilient. He went through a lot of hard shit, and now he's sober. And I feel like that's any druggies or drug addicts story when I say druggie, but I use that loosely because that's a not harsh word to me, but it could be a harsh word to them. So if that is offensive, I apologize. And I won't say it anymore, but basically, anybody who I've known to be an alcoholic or a drug addict and got themselves sober, I feel like that's the hardest thing to do, because you basically develop a really intense, close connection with whatever substance you're using, and then all of a sudden you just call it quits. And it's obviously not overnight, or it might not be overnight, but it's still a really hard thing to do. It's like being close to somebody and then never talking to them again. That's hard. It feels like a breakup, you know what I mean? It's a really hard thing to do. And for that reason, that's why I talk about Mike a lot, because that's huge. That's so hard to do, and the fact that you can do that and be so resilient. And then on top of that, he went to jail for tax evasion or something like that. And he went into jail fat, came out fit. You know what I mean? He took a bad situation and turned it into a good one. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of, accountability to do that thing. And I feel like that's so hard. And it takes a lot of strength, period. And so I don't feel like it's really, really that common, because if, having that much strength and having that much courage and, being that resilient was that common, I feel like everybody would be the most amazing versions of themselves. And I'm probably not the most amazing version of myself even to this day, so that's still really amazing to watch. But the reason I bring that up is just because I've been through a lot of shit, and I just have bounce backs. And I feel like everybody does have bounce backs in their own way. My bounce back isn't really unique. It's not a big huge story to tell, but I feel like that is my life. Like, I feel like it's really a huge part of me that's really strong and really tough and, like, is really about, whatever I'm about. Like, I'm really doing the things that I say I want to do and doing them with, unapologetically just being me. And I feel like it takes a lot of balls to do that. And I never really acknowledged the fact that, like, it takes a lot of balls to do that and to put yourself out there and to do those things even when those things are not completed or they're not well-rounded. You know what I mean? And I feel like I also need to talk about the fact that I feel like I'm wise. And I've had a lot of people tell me that I'm wise, but it's never really stuck to me that, like, oh, I am wise. Like, I am. Because I feel like that's another common thing. And I remember telling one of the people that was really, really close to me back in 2020 that, like, I feel like I'm an earth angel. Obviously, I'm not perfect. Obviously, I'm not here to, like, resurrect people or to, cure cancer, which would seem to be the purpose of, like, a really amazing thing. Like an angel, like angel with magical powers. I'm not saying that I have magical powers or blah, blah, blah. But I feel like I can be somebody's unconditional love even for a second. And to me, that's enough. And everybody's like, if God was real, then explain all these diseases and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, the universe is real just by looking at it. And no one said that, it was going to be butterflies and rainbows. And if you really wanted that to be the case, then you wouldn't have chose being a human. And if you don't think that being a human is a choice, it is a choice, because I can simply indulge myself in something that will kill me and no longer be here. But the fact of the matter is that you will still be here. And you like being here. You know what I mean? Like, people, might feel some type of way about being here, but at the end of the day, you're still here. You still enjoy being here. And I know that you enjoy being here, or else you wouldn't be here. And because of that knowing, I feel like it's gotten me to a lot of places a lot easier. Like, when I go to work and stuff, and it feels really mundane to go to work, and on days where I don't want to get up early, I remind myself, like, this is going to feel rewarding. And I don't even have to remind myself. I just think to myself, like, wow, this is rewarding because I feel like I'm an adult. I feel like I'm responsible. I feel like, what's it called? I feel like a really good member of society. I don't know what the word is for it, so we're just going to use that for now. But I feel like I'm doing something with my life, even if I'm not. Like, I could be working at, a gas station and feel like I'm a contributing member. There you go. A contributing member of society. And I'm like, I am doing something. I could work at a gas station. I could work at a grocery store. I could work at a warehouse. I could work doing anything. And I'd be like, I am a contribution to society. Even though the world is going to spin without me in it. And I think there's something really solidifying about the fact that I feel rewarded when it comes to doing the most basic mundane things, because that's what everybody's doing, although other people do it to different extents. Like, if you're a school teacher or, a judge, you probably feel really good about yourself just because of that position. Or maybe you still don't. And through me feeling that rewarded over doing the really basic stuff, I feel a lot stronger to do things that are out of the norm. Like, doing these podcasts, I'm not somebody that's going to put myself out there on the internet just because, like, I am fearful of fucking up, and I have fears about failure all the time, and I have fears about, like, did I say the right thing? Are people going to relate to what I'm saying? There's nobody watching this, like, who cares? And I've gotten to that point where, like, I ultimately do have fears, but I don't let those fears get in my way. And I don't know, there's something, like, today I felt like I just needed to gas myself up. And not gas myself up and be like, I am better than everybody here, because I'm really not. But, like, I'm better than I was yesterday. And the only person that I can compare myself to is myself. Because there's only one of me, and even then there's only one of me now. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even compare myself to the past version of myself. I can't even compare myself to the past version that was yesterday. Because I'm a different person. Because I can choose to act differently. Because I can choose different choices. And because I can acknowledge the fuck-ups of yesterday and try to be a better person. And, vice versa. I can choose that if today I woke up and chose violence, I could be that version of myself. And there's no reason to judge myself, And there's no reason to judge, period. Like, I try to not give my 2 cents in people's situations or in life just because I'm like, people are who they are, and, whatever happens to them is gonna hurt them most likely, so I don't, have the right words, I don't have the right footing to maneuver this situation in a proper way. And usually, like, I remember hiking with a bunch of my spiritual friends, and them talking about, is this being here a cultural appropriation moment? And me, I'm like, no, because if you are here, you see that these people are really here for the right reasons. Although management, not so much, But at the same time, you could call it cultural appropriation because it's not where it stems from. Like, it's not where it started. But I also think that cultural appropriation comes from me putting on the sweater and then claiming to be whatever this sweater is, And you could see through it because I'm not the same thing. Like, it's like if I put cotton on and I'm like, I'm a cotton plant, Like, it's not that easy. You have to prove that you really see that to be true. And at the same time, I'm like, well, people are kind of sensitive nowadays because if you actually go and do your research, these things are not all bad, But at the same time, the reason for that is because you punish one, you punish all. You know what I mean? Like, if I was over here claiming to be Irish, that would be cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? Like, I'm clearly not that. And for me to sit here and be like, that's my culture, BS. You know what I mean? And not that it would be sensitive of an Irish person to, like, sit there and be like, you're culturally appropriating my culture. But it would be a more sensitive topic if I was to fully believe that I was Irish. And to, know their customs and to be educated on their customs and to read about them and to read about their history and to actually, like, engulf myself in that culture and really believe that I am that culture and not for the beer or the music, like for the religious factors, for the spiritual factors, for who they are, for just having a love for them, their people. I feel like there's a difference between cultural appropriation and just pretending to be something. And actually, I said that backwards. I think there's a difference between pretending to be something and actually loving something. And I don't think it's a bad thing to love a different culture, but it is if that culture has been manipulated for, propaganda purposes or for war or for malintention, You just have to be really cautious of those things because they're real sensitive, like, areas. It's kind of like, how people talk about generational curse and generational wounds and generational trauma. It's like that. Like a generational trauma would be that Black people still to this day have to fight for their basic standings, like basic fundamental human rights in today's society. Like, that's a real wound versus, a white person just being sensitive and being like, well, you guys don't really have to fight for this, like, it's not, you're not even giving love to this other culture because you're not acknowledging the trauma that's actually there. And it's the same thing for any other culture, you know what I mean? Like, I could sit here and cut white people slack because not all of them are bad. But you get to this point where you're like, punish one, punish all. And I think that's where most people sit. They sit in the non-compassionate side of things, and they're like, well, you guys did this, so you have to suffer the consequences. It's kind of like when you were in school, they taught us to, like, if one person's being loud, whole class needs to be quiet. And because of that, I feel like we use that in our regular existence. Like, that's just the way that life, at least in America, kind of goes. Like, it's like, if that person's culturally appropriating, punish everybody who does or who looks like that. If I was sitting here in complete Native American attire, that would be cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? Because I'm not delving or taking into consideration the fact that they have so much generational trauma. Like, we literally stole their land. And I say we as in, like, Americans, because if you're an American, you're part of the problem. Like, period. And I don't care if you're Black American, or if you're, you know, Mexican American, or if you're Colombian American. Like, we're American. It's in our DNA. And I say that because you need to be sensitive about, like, what other people have gone through. And if I can't acknowledge that I'm part of the problem, that's part of the problem, you know? Like, denial is the first step. But regardless, I digress from that touchy subject. But, like, those types of things, I realized that, like, it's those types of things that make me realize that I am very compassionate. And that, you know, other people, it's not wrong what they do, but it's also not right. And it's also not right, but it's also not wrong. Like, there's no right, wrong, there's no left, right. It's just whatever direction you go in. And to you, that direction is always going to be right in front of you. If I go left, that's always going to be in front of me. Then the choice to go that way is always going to be in front of me. And having knowledge that I shouldn't have, like the fact that, like, I'm really smart and I understand, like, a lot of things without necessarily needing an explanation. Like, when I was going to school for computer repair technician, there was a lot of things that you just understand. Like, for the most part, most people, when they go into school, they're like, damn, I have to actually learn what the fuck all this shit does in order to, you know, work on this thing properly. But it's kind of like, if I went to school to be a car mechanic, all I'd have to do was remember what parts do what, and, you know, how to figure out what parts are going to do what, and swap those parts out. Like, it's really not that hard. But if you're going to school and they're like, this is a full page on what the steering wheel does, you're going to be, you know, like, either overwhelmed or just scared by how much information there is. And it's gonna seem a lot harder than it actually is. But I think for that reason, like, I grasp a lot of things. And a lot of people tell me that I'm smart, but I don't know if I fully am at that level where I'm like, oh, you know what, I am pretty smart. But I think for the most part, like, I'm smarter than, I don't know, like a dog. You know, like, I'll cut myself some slack in that sense that, like, I'm probably smarter than a dog. So, that's cool. But, or, you know what, I'm smarter than I was a day ago. And it's really, like, I just felt like, kind of hyping myself up today, just because today, not that it's, like, a bad day or anything, but I feel like I need to acknowledge where I stand with myself. And I like to do these check-ins couple months into, you know, the next episode. Like, I have I've done a little of these on the audio version of this, but I've never done a, like, praising myself video on my, or like the video version of this. And I realize that I get confused with words a lot. Like, there's so much going on in my mind all at once that I just mix all of the words, and sometimes I don't finish my sentences. And I watch these back and I'm like, I didn't finish what I was saying. So, yeah, bear with me because there's so much going on in my mind continuously. But today was one of those days where I felt like praising myself. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it because it feels good to be me today. And it's been a long time since I felt really good about being me. And sometimes you gotta do that, like sit in the mirror and just be dumb cheesy to yourself, but be real. You know what I mean? Like, don't sit there and be like, oh, you're beautiful. Nah, tell me the real shit. What about me is beautiful? Like, what is it? Is it my gestures? Is it my movements? Is it my language? Is it my mind? Is it my body? Is it my heart? Is it my soul? Is it my compassion? What is it? Don't just sit there and be like, oh, you're beautiful. And another thing, before I end this, if you don't talk to yourself in the mirror, I recommend trying it just because it's something like weird, you know? Like, you gotta try things at least once before you can, or at least 14 times. Because the reason I say that is because you only know if you like something after you've tried it 14 times. I'm talking about food specifically, but I take this into like all routes because if food takes that long to try before you like it, other things probably take a lot longer. But anyways, and I also feel like, you know what, fuck it, like you only live once, make life really worth it. And some weird thing that I also really enjoy is pretending that like the mirror is an alternate version of myself. Like it's a different timeline and we're just seeing the window, you know? So like we're gonna do the same movements because we're in sync, because we're the identical version of ourselves. We just make different choices along the way. And so because of that, I don't really do this often, but when I talk to myself in the mirror, I'm like, hey, you know, how are you? And, you know, I usually answer because I can only hear myself. And, you know, have a little conversation with myself because I'm like, oh, ain't nobody ask you how your day was. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me ask you how your day was. And if I'm doing something that's really urgent, I'll be like, hey, I gotta go. Or if I have time, then I'll sit down and have a little mini conversation with myself. It feels a little bit weird at first, but then you kind of get comfortable with yourself, you know, and being comfortable with yourself, I feel like is very, very important. So, you know, try it. And if you don't know where to start in the conversation, start by telling yourself things that you love about yourself, but be really raw with it and be like, you know what? I really like the fact that when this person fucked you over, you was a bad bitch, you was a boss bitch, and you said, you know what, it's okay, I'm gonna be the bigger person. And I really enjoy the fact that when they did it again, you weren't the bigger person because they should have learned their lesson, you know? So just be real with yourself. And anyways, I'm gonna end this here just because it already went over the time. So anyways, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. As always, I upload Mondays through Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you're new, welcome. I call my viewership my babies because you guys are my babies. And if you're a returning baby, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. And as always, you can find these audio version of the podcast is on all platforms where podcasts are. And the video version of this is on YouTube. So if this is something that you're interested in, if psychology, philosophy, self-help, science, I forget the last one, spirituality, is something that you're interested in, I'd recommend subbing or following whatever platform you're on and whatever platform you found me on. And yeah, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.